North Carolina has attracted national attention for its tax reforms since 2013. Does the state remain a role model for tax reformers across the country? Are other states following our lead or setting even better examples? Joining us now to help address those questions is Grover Norquist. He's president of the group Americans for Tax Reform. Welcome back to the program.
Absolutely. Good to be with you. Look, a lot of people talk about Texas, no income tax, Florida, no income tax, Nevada, no income tax, Tennessee, no income tax. And that's important. But what the other states really need is the model of how to get there. It doesn't do you any good to tell you somebody else is at the mountaintop if you're at the bottom. And what North Carolina has done has been a model for other states. As I travel around the country, people say, I want to be Texas, I want to be Florida, but I want to do it like North Carolina. And they see the model of bringing individual and the corporate income tax down with repeated reductions, tying it to revenue growth. As revenue hits this number, then we'll bring the corporate rate down and the individual rate down. That way you never get ahead of your ski tips. The counter example was Kansas, which had some dramatic reductions on spending, and they had a very good forward-looking, as revenue goes up, we bring down the rates. They had a problem with the Supreme Court, which mandated hundreds of millions of dollars of spending, so they couldn't match that. And they weren't focused on reining in spending at the same time that they were, quite understandably, correctly focused on bringing down taxes. So North Carolina has done it steady as she goes, 2 steps forward, 3 steps forward, no steps back, but not throwing a Hail Mary pass, 3 yards and a cloud of dust. And every single step has been reasonable, understandable, and only the thoroughly dishonest left argues, the world's going to go to Hades. No, it's a very modest shift, down, lower on corporate and individual rates. North Carolina used to be the high tax state in the region in income taxes. Now it's a lower tax state and clearly en route to zero. I was in Arizona and people were saying, we want to do what North Carolina did. I've been in Oklahoma, and people say we want to be like North Carolina. So it is helping North Carolina citizens with its approach, step-by-step approach to get to zero personal income tax, zero corporate income tax. They're certainly reaping the benefits of investment and migration from other states, from high-tax states into North Carolina. But you're also benefiting the rest of the country.
You mentioned that you talked to people in other states who would like to get to the 0 point and use North Carolina's path to get there. Are there any other states that you're seeing now that you say, okay, North Carolina, you started this ball, but now you ought to be watching what this state's doing and follow their lead?
Well, a number of states have gotten rid of their franchise taxes, which is a particularly destructive tax. 17 states still have it, but even many of those are looking to phase it out. Mississippi is, I think, 4 years into a 10-year phase out of their franchise tax. So saying we're going to get, let's say we can't, quote unquote, afford to get rid of it in 1 year. Okay. Stretch it out. How many years do you think you can take a bite of the apple each year? But make it a clear path to zero. Not, we'll cut it a little bit. People looking to move into North Carolina, as many do, or expand here, which is probably more frequent, are looking at the franchise tax and going, on the other border, we don't have the franchise tax. But if they know that North Carolina decided it's going, that's a big incentive to invest in job creation in North Carolina.
We are chatting with Grover Norquist. He is president of the group Americans for Tax Reform. I want to loop back to something you mentioned earlier, and that is that while tax rates have gone down, a big drop at first and then incrementally since then, the North Carolina government has also focused on keeping a lid on spending increases in the budget. How important is that?
It's very important to keep spending down and to trend it down, to constantly check, because government spending creeps up if you don't do anything. It's like middle-aged people gain weight if they don't do something. You have to actively decide you're not going to gain weight. Governments Everybody in the government thinks that if they had more money, they could do X, Y, or Z, and they all fight for it. They all quite recognize that it's a waste of money to spend it someplace else, but they don't have the same self-knowledge in their own department. So having an ethos that you weigh yourself every morning, keep checking how much is the government spending, and what are they promising for the future? Governments tend to grow by saying, well, we don't want to raise spending now, so tell you what, we'll raise your pension. So 30 years from now, when I'm dead, the mayor will have to go raise taxes to pay for the city pensions. So watching for promises of spending in the future is every bit as important, maybe more important, than focusing on let's not raise spending right now.
As we talk to some of the lawmakers who've been involved in this process and have been involved in cutting the rates, occasionally you'll hear someone who says, we've cut the rates and our revenues have gone up, so we really don't need to worry that much about the spending side. Why are they thinking in the wrong way if that's the way they're thinking?
Well, a couple of things happened. That's what happened to Connecticut and Kansas. When Obama said we're going to raise capital gains taxes in January, a lot of people sold stock. And in the last quarter of, I believe it was 2011, Connecticut got $40 million more than they'd expected. And they go, we're rich. We have this permanent $400 million a quarter new spending coming in. They'd missed. It was all driven by a one-time change. And Kansas, they got about $80 billion. And they said, oh, well, our supply side tax cuts, which did create growth and jobs, is really on steroids and much faster than we expected. And then they decided to go increase spending based on the higher projections, which then got you the backlash from the establishment press and from Democrats and from weak-willed Republicans who said, oh no, now we have to get rid of not the overspending, but the tax cut. They undid their tax cut by overestimating and increasing spending. I think you're much better off reacting very slowly to sudden increases in income, and when you see them lasting, that's the time to start, and again, bring the taxes down a little more.
Following up on that, for North Carolina, obviously we're interested in keeping the tax rates as low as possible and seeing government have the money it needs to run. From the national perspective, how important is it to you that North Carolina continue on this path and not become another Kansas?
It's extremely important because states that crash and burn often come to Washington and want to loot the rest of the country. And solid, pro-growth, stable, functioning states are the bulwark against bailing out California when it goes bankrupt. Who is going to say no when Illinois goes, we need money or we're bankrupt? The answer is go bankrupt, like General Motors should have. And it's very important that some states get it right because you need good examples. You need good examples. Throughout history, people look at heroes as good examples in their own personal life. But how do you live your life? How do you run your state? You got to look around at the other 49 states and say, let's be like North Carolina, let's be like Arizona, let's be like Texas, let's not be like Illinois. And the more good examples they are, the more credible they are. Because if Texas gets it right, someone could say, oh yeah, oil, That doesn't help for Alaska. They are more oil. But they go, oh, it's just oil. No, it's not. It's reining in spending. It's keeping the income tax in Texas case at zero. But the more states that do it right, the more clear it is to everyone else that it's not a one-time thing. It's not, oh my goodness, one state was lucky 1 year. No. This is over time. Some states perform better than others because they have lower taxes, less regulation.
Are you optimistic that North Carolina and other states are going to continue on this path of lower taxes and reining in the spending?
I am, because it works. It works on getting people reelected, which is step one. You got to convince politicians they're going to lose their job if they take a different approach. And it works because it works. Because it creates economic growth, it creates jobs, and when people have jobs, they're happier and they're more likely to vote for the guys who voted for more growth, and they're particularly pleased at lower taxes. So there's a very virtuous cycle where North Carolina cuts its taxes, says we're heading towards Florida, Texas territory on no income tax, no corporate income tax. Let's bring that down. And then as a result, other people come to North Carolina and tell everybody back in New York this is working. And I think people in North Carolina should not underestimate the amount of goodwill and how well informed people in other states are at the success of North Carolina. It does inspire political leaders in other states to want to emulate what they see as a very successful model.